teachers have been taught to develop an authoritarian reserve in their teaching. That's been a prescription to me to failure. An informal manner of relating events and people, especially if they mirror the experiences of the students, are the wedges in securing access to a student's mind.
So we would like to welcome Mr. L Silva, a very prolific writer, artist, and speaker and teacher. As I said, formerly our programs were just on reading, math, and the academic subjects. John took us to a higher level by infusing arts, culture, civic, and history. So now we are all emancipated. Thank you very much, John.
Thank you, Nene. Is this my turn now? Okay. Shall I share screen?
Yes, please, John.
Okay. Here we go. And let's start. Okay, can everybody see this?
Yes, please.
All right. The topic is teaching creative and critical thinking. And let me start. Oftentimes in educational conferences here in the Philippines and abroad, I am drawn to discussions on inventive ways to get students to learn, how to make them think creatively, how to develop inquiry in their minds, and develop opinions, critiques, and even better, highly develop appreciation of things around them instead of just pushing the like button. For over a century, half a century, I've taught and lectured teachers and students, and more recently under the auspices of our education organization, Synergia. Every time I am in front of an audience, I test reactions to what I say or project on screen. I look for what engages an audience, what makes them linger in my phrases, what made an impact in the way I juxtapose sentences or pause for effect. Teaching creativity in the advanced world oftentimes means having each student or teacher in front of a computer screen learning the latest creative app with colors and cheerful greetings. Oftentimes, the presentation is fast-clipped, reflective of the fast pacing in their society. It is assumed each participant has a level of technical savvy to be at a screen not aided and can fix any glitches when it happens. Any teacher would be enthused to add to their teaching arsenal how to get students to be engaged. But I come from the Philippines, and poverty rears its obstructive head at any attempts to implement creative learning notions. For example, a recent Zoom conference I had with a class about 100 kilometers north of Manila, where I am, on improving English grammar. The class chosen were selected students who showed high interest in the subjects and also had access or ownership to a cell phone, which would be their video screens for the next hour. That lessened the class to half, or a total number of 20 students. The attendance number would later decline throughout the hour. There were brownouts, electric stoppage, which canceled the participation of 4 or 5 students. Then there was a matter of weak signals. Students connected intermittently, and when they decided to find a steady signal, they resorted to climbing a tree or run up the side of a mountain to secure a signal. When finally the remainder of the students made it so far connected, there were issues of self-confidence, an inability to be at ease in speaking. They needed goading and eventually responded and interacted. But that was already with 15 minutes left. Clearly, any sort of modern app inclusion to creative teaching just will hardly work in the Philippine setting. Let me therefore share with you what I do in an underdeveloped country without the accoutrements of creative teaching possible. First, I welcome the return of face-to-face teaching. First, we welcome that because instead of the very faulty Zoom teaching and the failed modules that were distributed to schools throughout the country in lieu of a teacher's absence. Next, I welcome the return of teachers renewing basic reading lessons. The pandemic has significantly decreased further the reading and comprehension skills of students. If the national scores before pandemic showed students behind, it has been exacerbated further with the pandemic and the accompanying school disruption. With the return of face-to-face classes, we are back with the opportunity to increase reading and comprehension and in like manner, lay the groundwork for creative thinking. I share with you some low-tech but effective teaching methods I've used to spawn creative thinking and inquiry. These methods include using visuals, employing storytelling, establish a reading mandate, accessibility to libraries, providing art materials, and visiting museums. In the area of visuals, in a few weeks, I will have an exhibition of my organization, the library, Ortigas Library, an exhibition of 100 vintage photographs of the tribal peoples of the mountain province in the north. It will be in a high school in a small town known for having graduated high-achieving students. The principal has welcomed the exhibition, stating that test scores of her students have plummeted again due to the pandemic, and she needed another way to reach the students who have been without a schooling discipline and schedule. She believes the never-seen photographs of their students' ancestors in their native dress, in events, and in the local architecture that they no longer see will be a revelation to their identity and can ignite a learning moment. Storytelling. Teachers have been taught to develop an authoritarian reserve in their teaching. That's been a prescription to me to failure. I am successful communicating with students when I relate personal stories that end a lesson or an insight. Personal storytelling decreases the unequal relations between students and teachers. An informal manner of relating events and people, especially if they mirror the experiences of the students, are the wedges in securing access to a student's mind. A reading mandate. There is just no going around the subject. That to be creative and carry an opinion, one needs to have read and read much to read such a level. Reading and the corresponding comprehension scores in the country are abysmal. If in the past the level of television watching exceeded study and school time hours, now there is the addition of video gaming and mindless watching that wipes out the hours for potential reading. I have been quite strict on a reading mandate. Whenever I go around the provinces, I just impose. I just tell the The teachers, there shall be no video and TV watching for the whole week, school week, and watching allowed only on weekends after homework is completed and for a few hours. My draconian law is hard to implement given the supervision parents and teachers have to do. But what is to be impressed is that there must be reading time for students for at least a half hour each day. A book to read and later a report are also compulsory. Reading regains the flow of time in imbibing words, in sentence and paragraph constructions, and most importantly, in understanding the import of the author's overall message. Reading has no abrupt ending like TikTok, as it leads a reader through stories that may have taken several days to finish reading. A student's mind is rewired from the immediacy offered by video to a steady, more realistic pace of digesting the written text and making sense of it. Likewise, with TV's dulling powers, reading has an engaging quality, raising questions and even greater thought and rumination on the matter. Access to libraries. Libraries are underutilized in my country. There are city, town, and school libraries that for the most part are free to enter and use their services, including ours. There are a fair number of libraries throughout the country, and unfortunately, much of the reading fare in them are also dated. Nonetheless, there are good reading books still stocked, and there are current newspapers and magazines to read. Students should all be acquainted with libraries as a place for reading material and also as a place for study and solace. In recent times, libraries, like the Ortigas Library, which I work in, have been visited to borrow books and documents that straighten and clarify the flurry of false news now besetting us. Access to museums. The treasures in museums are undoubtedly a way to stimulate creative and critical thinking. Not all student visitors get that experience. The ways of a child's socialization at home or at school affects the way stimuli is received as in a visit to a museum. But a visit, nonetheless, is a departure from a normal day, allowing students to gaze at master artworks or ancient artifacts, spurring thoughts to wander and reflect. The mind is most supple to receive wider dimensions of creative and critical thinking in a museum setting. Lastly, access to art supplies. Art therapy has been used successfully in drawing out emotional expressions in children affected by external factors such as war. So it is to devote time in school or at work or at home, sharing coloring pencils, paintbrushes, and paper. This is a new world of communication for the student, other than the written text. It stimulates students, and for some, it may lead a path to an artistic streak or vocation in the future. For underdeveloped countries like the Philippines with a failed educational system, these low-tech methods of developing creative and critical thinking that I've used still manage to stimulate students in that direction. Lastly, the steep learning declines in students due to almost 3 years of a hasty and questionable modules distributed in lieu of teachers' absence, the faulty virtual learning through cell phones and screens affected by no signals or weak signals has been a severe setback for education in the Philippines. We are ever more aware now that that face-to-face teaching led by a well-trained, dedicated core of teachers and, mind you, parents, are the only and most effective way to spark the genius inherent in each student. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you for inspiring us again on developing the creativity, inquiry, and imagination of our students.